This video is brought to you by the Deck of Many and their animated spell cards, on sale now at animatedspells.com. Hello and welcome to the Gallant Goblin. I hope you're doing well. Today I wanted to introduce you to one of the Lost Omens lore books for Pathfinder. This is, over here, the Mwangi Expanse. One thing I adore about Pathfinder is that they have a regular series of hardcover lore books about their world that really make it feel like a real place filled with amazing sights and terrible dangers and interesting people. And I always say that 80% of being a game master is knowing your setting, and these Lost Omens lore books give you that. So far, in 2nd edition, we've had the World Guide, the Character Guide, Gods and Magic, Legends, the Pathfinder Society Guide, and the Ancestry Guide. All of them amazing. But before we jump into the Mwangi Expanse, if you have your eye on this cute little kobold plushie over here that we've been featuring in some of our recent videos, I can finally announce that we are taking him and his friends to Kickstarter. We're hoping to eventually make plushies of all of the kobolds here on my shirt. You can find the link in the eye in the corner of the screen or in the doohickey down below to go to sign up to be notified when the Kickstarter launches. As we reach more stretch goals, we'll be able to bring you more plushies. So go sign up right now, please. Now, the Mwangi Expanse is a land full of natural beauty and a diverse collection of cultures and peoples. A lot of the content in the book is inspired by cultures on the continent of Africa, but it goes well beyond that as well. This book goes deep on the Mwangi Expanse's long history, its vast biodiversity, its cultures and landmarks, its cities and schools and industries, governments, mysteries, and religions. And one key difference is that it's not written from the perspective of foreigners exploring a strange new land. No, it's written from the perspective of the people who live there, telling you about their own people and their own stories. It's a subtle change, maybe, but I think it's one that helps to keep the spotlight on the indigenous people and their stories and histories. And if you want to adventure in the Mwangi Expanse, the current Pathfinder Adventure Path, Strength of Thousands, will let you do that. And many thanks to Paizo for providing these books for us to review. In a moment, we're going to talk to one of the development leads for the Mwangi Expanse and one of the authors of the first book of the Strength of Thousands Adventure Path, called Kindled Magic, Miss Eleanor Ferron. But first, let me give you a little rundown of the Mwangi Expanse and what it brings to the table. Along with all the lore to help you adventure in the Mwangi Expanse, and there's a ton of it, the book also gives you quite a few new player options for your Mwangi adventures, and adventures anywhere. You get 6 new ancestries with the usual Pathfinder heritages. Those are sub-races for you D&D players, and you get the new ancestry abilities and ancestry feat trees. So first, you've got the Anati race of sentient spiders who can shift into humanoid form when they like. Next, you have the conrasu, who are shards of cosmic force given consciousness, who build little wooden bodies for themselves. Pathfinder is really wild, y'all. They aren't really sure of their own origins, but they have their own theories. They do seem to be connected to the Aeons, who are powerful monitor outsiders. It's a long story, and you know that I'm going to be asking Eleanor about these guys. Next, you have the many-eyed Galoma, who hide their deep-seated fear of predators with their terrifying visage. Then you have the shy and careful Grippleys, who try to stay out of the complicated affairs of others, but who can be quite formidable despite their small size. And you have the Shisk, an underground humanoid race with hollow bones. Maybe once they had wings and were capable of flight, but now they just retain their vestigial quills that resemble calcified pin feathers. They have a fascination with collecting esoteric knowledge. And finally, and maybe you can guess which our last playable ancestry is by the look on my face, yes, it's gnolls. The gnolls of the Mwangi Expanse are practical and pragmatic above everything else. They have no time for honor or mercy or cruelty even. They just want to get things done, and the ends justify the means. They just rely on their connection to their ancestors to lead them in the right direction. All those ancestries are considered rare, with the exception of the gnolls and the Gripply, who are uncommon. So you'll have to have conversations with your game master prior to rolling up your characters. And rarity speaks not only to the prevalence of these ancestries in the world, but also to the complexity and the challenge in role-playing them. The book also has a few new magical items, new gods and goddesses who can provide new abilities and spells for their worshippers, and a bestiary of the Mwangi creatures that you might encounter. And that's on top of hundreds of pages of history and lore and setting information, NPCs and story hooks for running published adventures like The Slithering that takes place in the Mwangi Expanse, and any homebrew campaigns that you may want to run yourself. Now, the Strength of Thousands Adventure Path lets you participate in one of the most important institutions in the Mwangi Expanse, the Magambia School of Magic, founded by the legendary Old Mage Datembe. You'll start the adventure as newly accepted students to the school, where you'll not only have to contend with your course load and the social responsibilities of being a student, but you'll also be investigating a strange infestation on school grounds that just may be portending something greater awaiting you down the line. The book also gives you new player rules for magical masks that play an important part in the story, and some new unique spells. Now, the Mwangi Expanse book is enormous, more than 300 pages. Pretty much every single page is illustrated. We could spend weeks talking about the various cultures and traditions and the peoples of the Mwangi Expanse. And the Strength of Thousands Adventure Path brings a lot to the table with rules for academic life. And what I can promise is a far-reaching campaign that's set in the Mwangi Expanse, but which will take you in the end very far from home. But to make sure we hit all the highlights, let's bring in one of the developmental leads for the Mwangi Expanse and the co-author of Kindled Magic here, Miss Eleanor Ferron. Eleanor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
How's everything going for you out there?
Well, things are pretty reasonable up here. Weather's all right. It's not flooding or on fire, so we're going to count that a win.
I feel like every time I talk to somebody, are you up in the sort of Pacific Northwest where a lot of the Paizo folks are?
Yeah.
Seems like every time I talk to somebody from Paizo, there was some sort of weather-related incident going on. I think they had the massive heat wave last time I talked to somebody up there a month or two ago.
Fortunately, that's cooled down.
That's good. It's still in the 90s out here, but it's not. We have air conditioning, so it's okay.
Yeah.
So you have done a lot of work for Paizo over the years. I was looking through your kind of resume, your portfolio on the wiki. Can you tell us maybe how you got started at Paizo and what some of your favorite projects have been?
Well, actually, I applied to a job there. I wasn't going to, but a lot of people were just like, hey, just do it. I did not get it. I wasn't really that qualified. But the editor at the time, the chief editor, said, well, I like the samples you sent. How about we see about setting you up as a freelancer for us? And it took a lot of nagging for them to remember, because I have learned that people at Paizo are extremely busy and being pulled in multiple directions.
Yeah.
But they did eventually give me an assignment, and that led to more. And then the next time that a job opening rolled around 3 years later, I applied and got it.
That's awesome. Do you have some projects that you've worked on in the past that stand out to you as being like, oh, that was so much fun. I really enjoyed that?
It all feels so long ago just these days. But probably the commencement, that would be Starfinder Society 0101. It was really fun to just get to be the first one in there to set the tone and the scene and these characters that rolled around and every potential that the setting held. Was something I got to think about and put into that little adventure. So
I've run that adventure at least once or twice. That's the one with the junk racers that you have to go and fix up, isn't it? And
yep,
is that the same one? Yep.
The breakout band Strawberry Machine Cake, which I put in as a paragraph, and it sort of got out of my hands very quickly.
I spent a lot of time on that band. There's another adventure a little bit further. Did you write the adventure where they go to the concert? Was that you as well?
It was.
Oh, perfect. I love it. I don't know. That needs to be a core part of Starfinder going forward in everything they do. It isn't everything I do with Starfinder. So, I love it. And now you're working on, or at least more recently, I know this is probably for you in the past, it's just coming out for us, but the Mwangi
Yep.
Expanse. What drew you to that project? 'Cause that's a big, complex project.
Just recognizing how underrepresented it was. Just in the past, we had a book for it, but it was 64 pages and it was very bare bones. And the parts that were most interesting to me were the parts that got glossed over the most because it focused so much on people coming in and going on safaris into the jungle, and then it made these brief mentions of these massive cities that, that it's like, oh, there's a city here, you can go there and you can shop and you can get some supplies, and then you can go into the jungle where the interesting things are. It's like, no, wait, I want to hear more about the city. You told me that there's a bunch of pirate hunting navies there and giant engineering marvel walls, and tell me more about that. And of course we didn't. So I really wanted to get back in there, expand on what I found the most interesting and what I wanted to hear about. And I think a lot of other people wanted to hear about too. What are the people down there doing?
And I think that's really cool that you've taken that perspective and shifted it. So instead of we think about the old adventuring clubs that would go down to deepest, darkest Africa. And I think that was maybe the old perspective they took. And now it's from the perspective of the people who live there, who call it home. And you're able to get much more deep. And then in your adventure that you write over here too, I get the sense that you are hoping, and correct me if I'm wrong, that people will play characters from the Mwangi Expanse who are kind of locals. Is that kind of what your thoughts are with that?
I mean, there's always sort of the hope that you have created an environment interesting enough that people will want to be from there. And I don't really mind if you want to play somebody who came from somewhere else in the world and is a foreign exchange student. That has its own story to it. But I know that people like to rebel against what they consider to be the default. Some people.
Right.
In the same way that a lot of people are just sort of like humans, because they're the default, even though everything in this setting is based off of humanity. But yeah, it's not so much that I'm hoping that they play people from that area like in general so much as you hope that you've made a place so engaging that people want to engage with it.
And this is a massive place that you've built here, you and your team. Do you have any particular, because there's different chapters for the different sections of the Mwangi Expanse, and you go in depth onto all these areas. I guess my first question too is like, how much of this, because I'm not as familiar with Pathfinder First Edition, how much of this is brand new locations, information, and cities? Like, it sounds like a lot of it's brand new.
It's sort of complicated. Like I mentioned before, we had that original book on it, and a lot of the places in here got mentioned in that book, but they were so constrained by the space that it basically amounted to nothing. Like, the Taralu and the Mbeke dwarves, there was a paragraph of information on them. It's like, oh, there's some dwarves. They both like cloud dragons. This one group lives in the mountains, the other group lives in the jungle. And that was about it. And so we had those prompts almost to give to our authors and say, well, here's what we know. Go wild with it. But, they turned that one paragraph into 10 pages. And so a lot of it is brand new. But you can go back and see, oh, it was mentioned back here. This is just where we developed it to the point where anything of use.
You can really extrapolate it. Do you have an area or some story hooks that you've dropped and your team has dropped in this book that are maybe some of your favorites that you would like to draw people's attention to?
Well,
I know it's like picking favorites from all your team. I know.
Yeah, that's almost a rude question.
It's true. Or just something that sticks out in your mind.
A lot of people say Nantambu, and I don't disagree because it's just such a nice place. And I feel like we all just want to go and live there.
We all need an escape these days.
but I'm gonna say Vidrian because these people overthrew this colonialist government, but that means they're starting from scratch. You have a lot of people with a lot of ideas on how to run this place, and nobody has any practical experience, and nobody wants to say, no, you can't do it that way to the other people because they deserve their voice to be heard too, and nobody's had their voice heard for a long time. But at the same time, you need to actually run an effective government, and that means making decisions. And sometimes those decisions are just, no, we're doing it my way. We're doing it this way.
Right.
And so anybody who goes to Vidrian is going to be tied up in the future of this nation, whether they like it or not. And it also means that there are so many different adventure hooks that are beyond just, let's go and explore and defend this settlement from monsters or bandits or whatever. They still have that because they have so many foreign enemies who want to see them fail. But there's also things like, how are we gonna do this trade dispute between these two factions? We've got invasive species everywhere. What are we going to do about those? We have a burgeoning intelligence network, and we need to do spy versus spy in other nations. Just so much potential there, and so much writing. So much stakes, the high stakes. You're not saving the world, but if you fail, this country that deserves to live could collapse.
Mm-hmm. Yes, high stakes. Now, you've also introduced several new ancestries in this book, and some of them are wild. And I wanted to ask you about one in particular to me that stood out, and that's the conrasu. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah, they're hard to wrap your head around, aren't they? And
They are.
that's sort of the reason why they're rare. It's not because they're overpowered or anything. It's because they're so challenging for a role player to get their head around.
Right.
And I'm glad they've proved popular despite that. But the thing is, I kind of like that there's so little on them because it's not just us that's trying to figure them out. It's they themselves are still trying to figure themselves out. They're these little shards of aeon and cosmic force, and they've been like stuffed into a little ball, and they need their tree exoskeleton to move around, and they have to basically figure out everything from scratch. They don't have animal instincts like we do. They're like these little chunks of maybe sound or light or gravity or heat, and they have to interface with a world that doesn't communicate on that alone. And also the fact that people know so little about them means they come up with their own solutions, and that's kind of what they have to do too. They have to build their tree exoskeletons to do what they want to do on this world. Because I saw once that somebody was like, well, how do they speak? But they sort of answered their own questions. Well, I thought, because they have wooden bodies, maybe they would make like a wooden instrument, like panpipes or something, and sort of like play tones through it and have like this really musical voice. And I was like, that's so cool. That's so much better than anything I could have come up with. And so that's sort of what I think of them as. They're these little balls that are trying to. They're really alien to a living world because they're not organic creatures, and they're trying so hard to come across, these people and learn how to live among them. And that's what makes them interesting to me, is they're trying to learn what it is to expand their consciousness beyond what they are.
Do you feel like it is an ancestry that is going to be kind of left for different gaming groups to interpret that they want to, or do you think we're going to be seeing more of them? I don't know. Do they show up? And I don't know how much you can tell us in this adventure path. Do we think we'll learn more about them as we go through the next couple of years?
Well, I certainly hope we learn more about them. It's one of those things where it's sort of at the mercy of publishing schedules and what books manage to show up and what priorities the company does with their limited space. So it's one of those things where I really hope we see more about them, but I can't promise anything.
Gotcha, gotcha. Now, I was talking to Stephen Glicker from the Roll for Combat podcast the other day, and he was talking about his 40 years in Paizo and D&D, and talking about Pathfinder adventure paths in particular. And he was saying that usually you have like one normal adventure path, and the next one's going to do something a little different. And I feel like this, your Strength of Thousands one, is going to be the one that's a little bit different because you have to balance, the social demands and the academic demands of school with an adventure path. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what makes this adventure path special for you.
Uh, I mean, just the feeling of having what amounts to a normal life and a normal education in this wild fantasy setting, because we go in, assuming we're the big heroes, we're exceptional people, and this is just like you're a bunch of college kids, but you still live in this fantastic world. You still have to deal with it, and so that's sort of what I like about it is, you're still dealing with socializing with these people who are there. You're still dealing with studying, trying to get good grades, the pressures that everyday life, but also combined with, hey, you live in a magical world and you're even studying to be a part of that magical world, but you're not quite there yet. You're just a bunch of kids, really. And it's sort of just that here's some normal life, quote unquote, in the midst of all these world-shaking cataclysmic events, and you just want to go into academia and get your thesis published.
Yeah. There's not a lot of adventure paths that incorporate, a little bit of, what we consider maybe a little bit more mundane things, but that can be kind of fun to role play your way through. The Extinction Curse adventure path had basically running a business. If we have GMs who are watching who are deciding if this is an adventure path for them, what would you tell them as far as, if your group enjoys this or that, besides the theme, is there anything else that you would say for those GMs who are kind of trying to make up their minds about it?
If your group really enjoys role playing with each other, with NPCs that they find in the world, because a lot of it's focused on talking with the teachers, talking with the students. If your group enjoys, really thinking about the themes of magic and, solving problems that maybe don't necessarily have a clear-cut solution, you can't just cast the spell that solves the problem that you have encountered. You might have to think outside of the box a little, that sort of thing. If your group maybe doesn't enjoy combat as much, if they enjoy peaceful solutions sometimes, that's not to say that there aren't fights that you have to just knuckle down and go through it, because some people won't listen to reason. But there's a lot of things in there where it's, well, let's see if we can solve this without hurting anybody, because that's not what we're here at Non-Tombo to do.
That's great. And do you have tips? So if they have decided to run this adventure, and you have like all those teacher NPCs, those wonderful student NPCs that you wrote up. I love your chapter on the other classmates that they have and who they can befriend and get special benefits from, bringing them into their social circle in a way. Do you have tips for GMs who are looking to tackle this adventure? Things that they can
yeah.
do?
I mean, I would recommend, the reason we gave you those little quick sort of guides to the NPCs at the start of their entry was just so you could put them all in a line, and then when your PCs are like, oh, I want to go talk to so and such, you're just like, oh, who was that? Oh gosh. But you have that at your fingertips. Just be like, okay, I know basically what they're about. I know their quirks. I can just take this and run with it, and I'll probably get it right. But I've seen podcasts who sometimes they write scenes between like a player and a GM, and then they role play out that scene as just sort of like a cut scene to the rest of the group, and that keeps that lets you develop it, just sort of between games when you're not under time pressure, and then show it off and not maybe bog down the group with just a one-to-one conversation when everybody's you're trying to play. And also, depending on how experienced your group is, maybe some of them have GM'd before too, you could consider just handing out some of these students to them as sort of auxiliary NPCs for them to run. So it's like, okay, you're not in this scene. Why don't you run Anchor Route or something? And so the player is still involved with the scene, even though they're not playing their PC. And that keeps everybody engaged. And it also means, you don't have to remember everybody in this campus. But that's, we recognize that there's a lot of people on campus. And so just kind of spreading out, talking with them and dealing with them can really help lighten the load for a GM that maybe has a day job and can't concentrate on all of these people.
I love that. I love that you're giving the players maybe different responsibilities than they may be used to keep them on their toes. That's a wonderful tip. I love that. Do you have anything else you want to share with us about the Mwangi Expanse or about Kindled Magic that I haven't asked you yet? Any final thoughts you want to share with us about these?
Gosh, I don't know. I would recommend going to the channel of our design lead on the project, Mark Seifter. He has a channel called Arcane Mark, and he and Linda Zayas Palmer, who is the head of organized play right now, have been doing a series on the Mwangi Expanse for weeks now. And so if you really want an in-depth reaction to that whole book and just hearing if that place is right for you and if anything really just catches your eye, I would go and watch that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I want to get him on the channel at some point because he's also done so much for Paizo, and he's got the Kickstarter going on right now for the Battlesuit Bestiary and his dragon book that he's come up with. So I would love to reach out to him too sometime. But thank you so much for sharing some of what you've done here. I hope that you'll come back in the future and share with us more about your Starfinder, your Pathfinder work, and other things you do. You also do art for Paizo sometimes, which I don't know.
I only as just a side fan thing.
But it's great.
But I do put out what I draw sometimes.
I was telling you before we started the interview that I remembered your picture of the android. I think is it from the commencement or one of those early Starfinder Society missions?
Yeah, it's from the commencement. It's Velocity, the android racer.
That's right. So I still remember. That's one of the images that has stuck in my mind all this time, and sharing it with my players when we were running that adventure. So you don't often get people who are doing both art and the writing for an adventure. So I think that's awesome, and I really appreciate you coming in and talking to us today. Thank you so much for joining us, Eleanor. The Mwangi Expanse is available now wherever you buy your gaming books. It has an MSRP of $49.99. You can also get the PDF version from Paizo.com for $34.99. Strength of Thousands Book 1, Kindled Magic, is also available right now. It has an MSRP of $24.99 for the softcover and $17.99 for the PDF. And if you're interested in being a player in the campaign, you can find a link to the free Strength of Thousands player guide in the doohickey down below. And Book 2 of the adventure, Spoken on the Song Wind by Quinn Murphy, is also out now. It takes our new students to the nearby Mwangi metropolis of Nantambu, known as the Song Wind City. Book 2 is largely a sandbox adventure, which allows the players to set their own course. The book also gives you a ton of new magical items tied to the Mwangi lore, and 2 new archetypes: the folklorist, who is a magical storyteller, and the Nantambu chime ringer, the city's elite guard, who also carried on the tradition of crafting chimes. Spoken on the Song Wind is also available now for the same prices. We're expecting Book 3, Hurricanes Howl, around the second week of October. Now, if you're a D&D player, you should also check out the new line of animated spell cards by our friends at Hit Point Press. These reference cards not only make gameplay easier by letting you have all your spell details at your fingertips, but they also just make playing the game so much more fun. There's just something about having something tangible in your hands that brings the game to life. And being able to see your spells almost magically animate in your hands will make you want to play a caster. They have decks for spells of all levels, so you can slowly pick them up over over time as you level up. And they also have animated decks for conditions like prone and exhausted, invisible, and poisoned. And for you GMs, they have a deck of animated townsfolk cards to help you create those NPCs on the fly. And they're all on sale right now during their pre-order period. Check them out at animatedspells.com. Again, many thanks to our guest, Ms. Eleanor Ferron, and to Paizo. And thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed the video, clicking the little thumbs up button down there will help other people find us. And please subscribe to see our future content. If you click the little bell icon down there, you'll be notified when we drop new videos. You can also keep us on the air and have a say in what we review by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/thegallantgoblin. And get the latest info from us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And go sign up for our Kickstarter Kobold plushie Kickstarter. For now, though, please stay safe, have fun, love each other, and I'll see you next time at the Gallant Goblin.